At 02:23 hours, 3 Ukrainian FP1 drones tore across Russian-monitored waters at 180 km/h, heading straight for a spy ship that had been crippling Ukraine's naval drone operations. The Russian vessel sat 15 miles off Novorossiysk, its R-300A1T antennas listening intently. For 6 weeks, it had tracked every movement, every signal, building a pattern of life and getting close to predicting strikes. The sea had been calm, quiet even, but that was about to change. Skimming just 3 meters above the waves, the Ukrainian drones raced toward the ship. Their plywood frames gave them radar signatures smaller than a seagull, almost invisible to systems built to track metal aircraft. 20 minutes after launch, a Russian 4-post R reconnaissance drone appeared on the horizon, flying its routine racetrack pattern 30 kilometers off the Ukrainian coast. Its Canadian-made MX-15DI camera could spot a basketball 5 kilometers away, detecting temperature changes as small as 2 degrees Celsius. At 02:45, the 4-post display lit up, 3 small contacts, low altitude, heading east at 180 km/h. Operators zoomed in trying to classify them. Instantly, the drone's pre-programmed evasion kicked in. They dropped to 2 meters above the sea, vanishing into radar ground clutter, the noisy returns from churning waves that hide low-flying targets. Then came the advantage of wood. Within minutes, their plywood frames cooled to match the sea's temperature. To the 4-post thermal camera, they simply disappeared. The operator logged the contacts as possible birds and moved on, unaware he had just missed the lead wave of an attack. Moments later, the reason for their hasty launch became clear. Russian Shahed drones had found the FP1's launch site, striking minutes after they departed. The operators barely escaped as 50-kilogram warheads obliterated their gear. The Russian network was reacting, but not fast enough. At 03:30 hours, while the FP1 sped across the Black Sea, 20 Ukrainian naval drones launched toward Sevastopol at 80 km/h. What followed would lure Russia into abandoning its most valuable intelligence. Ship the decoy swarm, a mix of modified jet skis and small boats, cost less than $10,000 each. Fitted with transmitters mimicking real naval drones, they looked perfect on radar. They moved in formation, emitted authentic signals, and even carried heat sources to fool infrared sensors. To Russian operators, it appeared to be the largest drone assault since October 2022. The deception was flawless. The Ukrainian operators guided the swarm via satellite for the first 50 kilometers before switching to autopilot. The fake drones spread into attack formations, performed evasive maneuvers, and approached realistic targets, all to sell the illusion. At Novorossiysk, the Russian admiral had 6 K-27PL helicopters ready. With 4 more at Sevastopol, the fleet's only real defense against naval drones. Ships were too slow, and fighters couldn't hover. Helicopters, however, could drop depth charges and sweep wide sectors quickly. Doctrine dictated they respond to the visible threat first. All 6 Novorossiysk helicopters launched west at 270 km/h, their rotors thundering into the night. Each minute they flew west was another minute the real attack advanced east, unchallenged. By the time they realized the ruse, they'd be hundreds of kilometers off course. The spy ship, now exposed and without air cover, was vulnerable. The 3 FP1s adjusted course 15 degrees north, exploiting a weakness Ukraine had discovered months earlier. 2 Russian Podlet K1 radar stations covered the sector, each rotating 10 times per minute. For 4 seconds every minute, their sweeps left a small gap, a 2-kilometer-wide corridor of invisibility. But the Russians had started desynchronizing the radars, shrinking the window. The first drone slipped through at 04:47, visible for 2 seconds, then gone. The second followed, perfectly timed. The third began drifting off course due to a gyroscope fault. At 04:49, it corrected hard north, burning precious fuel just as the radars shifted back in sync. The operator briefly saw a fast-moving blip, but dismissed it as a bird. The third FP1 made it through, but with only a minute of fuel left for the final strike. Meanwhile, the spy ship maintained its station 15 miles off Novorossiysk, protected by 2 patrol boats circling 5 kilometers out. Standard practice since the loss of the Moskva. At 05 am, the decoy fleet played its final act. As the Russian helicopters neared, the drones scattered. Some ran aground, others circled until fuel ran dry. Their mission was complete. The helicopters wasted an hour, and most of their ammunition chasing $10,000 decoys. When they turned back, half their fuel was gone, and they were 180 kilometers off station. By 06 UR, the lead FP1 was 240 kilometers from its target when its GPS began to drift east. The drone wasn't turning, reality was. The Russians had activated their R-330ZH JITEL system from Crimea. This wasn't simple jamming, it was deception, broadcasting fake GPS signals that rewrote the battlefield itself. 100 watts versus real satellites running at just 0.0001 watts. The Russians had mastered that trick, pulling drones out of the sky one by one. Now they were walking the FP1 straight toward a Panzer battery. But the Ukrainians had learned too. Every 50 kilometers, old oil platforms dotted the Black Sea. The FP1's basic cameras could spot them from 5 kilometers away, recalibrating its course using preloaded coordinates. No spoofing could beat the oldest sensor of all. The human eye, the Mark I Mod 1 eyeball. The second drone never made it. At Euro 6:15, its GPS died, not from jamming, but a cheap Chinese capacitor that couldn't handle the cold. It switched to inertial navigation, but that system drifts 10 meters a minute over water. 8 kilometers off course, it was heading for empty ocean. By 06:45, it hit the sea. No explosion, just gone. 2 drones left. The third drone, 5 kilometers behind, still had GPS for the moment. Then the Russian ship went active. Its mineral ME radar swept the western approaches, while its signals team hunted for harmonics, the ghost frequencies every circuit leaks when it resonates. At 07:23, they found something, bearing 285, moving 180 kilometers per hour, 15 kilometers out. The radar locked on. The FP1's threat receiver caught the signal, but the drone's wooden body confused the system. The Mineral M's algorithms expected sharp returns from metal. Wood gave mushy echoes. The radar kept losing lock. The operator reported intermittent contact and possibly birds. The FP1 reacted. Its programming told it to go dark when radar was detected. It shut down everything but its gyroscope and compass, flying blind. But the Russian jammers protecting against naval drones created a new problem. Operating between 20 and 1,000 megahertz, they bled into the ship's own communication bands, distorting radar returns. The Russians had a name for it: electromagnetic fratricide. Friendly systems fighting each other. At Aero 7:25, the ship dispatched a patrol boat to check the ghost contacts. The boat accelerated to 35 knots. The PKM gunner loaded a fresh 200-round belt, braced against the mount, and waited. They had drilled this hundreds of times. Engage at 500 meters, walk tracers into the target, fire until splash. Standard procedure: investigate, identify, engage. But their briefing covered aluminum drones with heat signatures, not plywood ghosts. The lead FP1 had 3 minutes of fuel left. Behind it, the third drone flew on, blind but unseen. Fog thickened, cutting visibility to 500 meters. At 07:30, the lead FP1 reached the target zone, 15 miles off Novorossiysk. The Russian spy ship sat exactly where predicted, still vectoring its patrol boats. The ship had built a radar fence, 2 boats with overlapping ME1 coverage, each capable of detecting small targets out to 15 kilometers. Soviet doctrine assumed one thing: physics would cooperate. But the Black Sea had other plans. A temperature inversion had formed. Warm air over cold water, bending radar beams upward like light through glass. The difference was severe: 10 degrees in just 50 meters. The radar's 50-meter altitude return was actually 80 meters. Anything flying below 30 meters was invisible. The FP1 at 3 meters altitude might as well have been underwater. At 07:32, the drone slipped under the radar. A patrol boat spotted it visually at 500 meters. The FP1's camera saw the muzzle flash, then tracers skipping across the waves. 3 hits tore through its wooden frame. 1 clipped the propeller. The engine shook violently but kept going. 90 seconds of fuel left. At 07:33, the spy ship's mast came into view 800 meters ahead. The damaged prop had cracked its mount, but the drone pressed on. The patrol boat radioed. Drone inbound, bearing 2 at 85, damaged but flying. On the bridge, the crew grabbed binoculars, scanning south. They should have been watching their jammers. The fake GPS signals whispering lies across the sky. The third FP1 drone had been lucky. Flying on its mechanical gyroscope alone, it held its course. Emerging from the morning haze at 07:34, It approached from the port bow at 180 kilometers per hour, skimming just 10 meters above the sea. Then its engine finally seized, sending it into its last silent glide. The lead drone had done its job. Every Russian eye was fixed on it as it plunged into the water, unaware that the real threat was closing in unseen. The ship's navigation radar couldn't angle below 5 degrees, a limitation its designers never thought would matter. Patrol boats were out of position. The bridge crew scanned the wrong sector. Like the Ukrainians, the Russians relied on visual confirmation, and that was their undoing. A lookout spotted the third drone just 300 meters away. Too late. Its camera locked onto the bridge roof, targeting the mast that housed all 3 critical antennas. The 25-kilogram warhead struck the base of the mast. The explosion ripped through the bridge in an instant. The R381T arrays that could detect radio signals from as far as Romania melted. Computers holding 6 weeks of intelligence turned to slag. Metal twisted into grotesque shapes. Secondary blasts tore through the power systems. And when the fires finally burned out 18 hours later, the ship's radar suite looked like something out of a Salvador Dali painting. 6 weeks of data, dozens of recorded drone launches. The patterns that might have ended Ukraine's drone offensive were gone. The ship would sail again, but its electronic eyes and ears were blind forever. Within hours, Ukrainian drones were launching from new sites with new patterns, once again invisible. The Russians could still strike back, but they were shooting in the dark.